Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. Tara, have we got the public on stream? Tara, you're muted.
Sorry, Chairman, yes, we do. Everyone's on.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the council meeting on Thursday, the 16th of July, 2020. My name is Councillor Bob Boyce and I am the Chairman of the Morden District Council. The meeting is held under new regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. There are a few housekeeping issues to run through, including our new working practices, which have been implemented due to the pandemic and the etiquette for this meeting. First of all, please could I ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphones remain muted and your video feed off when not addressing the council. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting will be hosted remotely via conference software, which allows members of the public to virtually attend the meeting whilst being able to protect themselves and others and observe the government's lockdown measures. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak, or then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating your wish to speak, what you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for any other purpose. Members, the process this afternoon will obviously be different, and for some items I may invite each member to speak in. Therefore, I would encourage all members to keep your contribution as clear and concise as possible, please. When invited to speak, please ensure you turn on your microphone and camera. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you'll reference a page or paragraph number. Could I also ensure that everyone is directly connected to a power supply so that nobody drops out due to short battery life? We may encounter some glitches this afternoon, so I hope that everyone will bear with us as we get used to this new way of working. And lastly, if members need to leave the meeting at any point, please do make this known and use the chat function to signify that you need to leave the meeting. I will now ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Mr. Holmes.
Good afternoon, members. Richard Holmes, Director of Service Delivery. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. Paul Dodson, Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance.
Good afternoon. Chris Leslie, Director of Resources.
Afternoon, Simon Quelch, Monitoring Officer.
Good afternoon, Matthew Lee, Lead Specialist Place.
Good afternoon, Jackie Longman, Strategy Theme Lead, Place.
Mr. Butcher.
Yeah, good afternoon, Stephen Butcher, Commercial Manager.
Thank you. Mr. Burnham.
Chairman, I don't think he's online yet.
Okay. Mrs. Holmes.
Again, I think she's joining us later, Chairman.
Okay. And Mr. Thompson might also be joining us later if he's not already present. Miss Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Tara Bird. I'm the committee clerk for this meeting. Thank you very much.
Now, Tara, is there any other officers present that you know of at this time?
No, Chairman, not that I'm aware of. Thank you.
I'll go on to agenda item 2 then. Apologies for absence. Tara, have we got any
yes, Chairman,
apologies?
I've got apologies from Councillor Dewick.
I think so. Sue White is having difficulty getting on. She's trying to log on in a remote area, so I'll send her apologies.
Okay, thank you.
I think she's listed it here. Sorry to butt in, Chairman.
Yes, go on. After you've butted in. You've gone mute.
Sorry, Chairman. I think she's listed as here, Sue.
Okay, well, we'll sort that out later. I think at this stage I'll go to Chairman's announcements.
Chairman, just before you do that, sorry to interrupt. We haven't done members' roll call.
Oh, right. Please, can we do the roll call then, Tara?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, if you could just confirm if you're present, please. Starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
Yes, I'm present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger. Councillor Bassinger. Councillor Miss Beale.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Beale. Councillor Bell.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Mrs. Channer.
Hello, Tara. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Durham. Chairman, Councillor Durham has given his apologies. He will be attending a little late. He's stuck in another meeting.
Okay.
Councillor Edwards. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Fluker.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Harker.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Hurd.
Present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Jarvis.
Present, thanks, Tara.
Keys. Councillor Keys.
Present, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Lagan.
Very good afternoon, Tara. I can confirm I am present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mays.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Morley.
Here.
Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris, you're muted.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Councillor Nunn.
Present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Siddle.
Good afternoon, Tara. Present.
Councillor Skeens.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Tara and members. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Good afternoon, Tara. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Yes, present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
I'm present, Tara, but I won't be able to use video because I haven't got a very good broadband connection. So you'll be able to hear me but not see me, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
I am present, Tara, but I'm having real problems with connectivity, so I'm not sure how long I'm going to be in or out. But at the moment, I'm here. I've logged in 4 times already. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tara. Now I'm going to go to Chairman's announcements, and it's with great sadness I announce the passing of Honorary Alderman of Essex, Rodney Lister Bass, OBE, who has in the past been the leader of this authority and has been chairman of it twice. Rodney has spent 40 years serving the people of this district as a district councillor, and as his ability and his conduct of business should be an example for us all, and I severely mourn his passing. He was a friend, a colleague, and a mentor of mine. And I would ask members for a few moments silence and contemplation on the life and the good works of Rodney Bass. Can we now go back to agenda item 3, declaration of interests, to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items of business on the agenda, and having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the chat function now to indicate, and I will invite you to speak. I've got Mrs. Channer and Mrs. Channer so far. Mrs. Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'd like to declare my non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council for any item on the agenda that may relate to Essex County Council in any way or manner, because obviously we do work often with Essex County Council. So I'm just covering any aspect, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to disclose a non-pecuniary interest in item 10 as I'm a ward member for Malden North, item 11 as I'm on the working group, and item 19 for a personal matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara, is there anybody else?
No, Chairman, nobody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much then. I then can go to the minutes, agenda item 4, the minutes of the 2nd of July 2020 and contained on pages 7 to 16. And I am asking their approval as a true, accurate record. I so move. Is that second? Right.
Second. Yes.
Is that everybody agreed that the minutes?
Chairman, I have got an amendment, a matter of accuracy, please.
Right. Councillor Hurd, please let me have it. What page and where is it?
It's page 8, Chairman.
Yeah.
And it speaks about the notice of motion. It's just the last part of 4, and it said Councillor MS Hurd advised that in respect of.
Okay.
On the middle line, it should read the council waives the overall political control, but it's got ways.
Oh, Tara, you've got that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Durham, you've joined us and you have a declaration to make.
Yes, apologies, Chairman. I will just declare the usual non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council, and that interest covers anything pertaining to Essex on the agenda today. Thank you.
Right, then I come to agenda item 6 again, Chairman's announcements. I just wish to add that I attended the Civic Centre at Chelmsford this week on the launch of the new CCTV system that's operating in Malden, and I was very impressed, and I'm sure members will be getting some information from the communication team at some time in the future. Thank you. I now move on to agenda item 7, the minute book, Performance, Governance and Audit Committee. And can I ask the chairman of that committee, Councillor Bamford, to present the minutes, please? Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chairman. I will say these have not been approved by the committee itself. So these minutes are on pages 3 to 12 of the mod.gov pack. and it's for the PGA Performance Governance and Audit Committee that was held on the 25th of June. Shall I go through page by page, Chairman? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Is that agreed? Noted?
Noted.
Agreed.
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 Thank you.
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Item 9, questions in accordance with Procedure Rule 6.3, of which notice has been given. I have no, there's no questions been received, so we go on to agenda item 10, draft Lower Street action plan. Can I ask the leader to present this? Leader.
Thank you, Chairman.
Leader?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to let you know, you're breaking up quite badly, so whether or not you want to turn off your video feed, I don't know. But Chairman, before I give way to Mrs. Longman to present this report, can I pay tribute to her and her team on behalf of all members for the enormous amount of work that's gone into this document. There has been a lot of work. We've been through 2 consultations, and in my mind, it really does reflect the hard work that's gone on. So, Chairman, with your permission, I'll give way to Mrs. Longman, and then perhaps you'll come back to me with regards to the recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs. Longman.
Thank you, Chairman. So the Policy S5 of the LDP and the CAMP Project 2 seek to retain the market town focus of Malden's entire high street and highlight the need to increase footfall and improve the retail offer at the lower high street, support regeneration and diversification of the town centre, including the evening economy, and encourage sustainable travel. The Lower High Street Action Plan has 7 actions to realise the potential of the Lower High Street, sustain the vitality and vibrancy of the whole High Street, and encourage a diverse town centre economy. The 7 actions have been reviewed by local key stakeholders and businesses set out in Appendix 2 and have been further reviewed through the reset and recovery response to COVID-19 that has galvanised and mobilised community and business support for the high street recovery at both district and county levels, and with the advice from the government's High Street Task Force. Action 1 sets up a high street focus group led by the council to champion the best interests of the whole high street to achieve the LD Policy S5, the overarching master plan objectives, and the high street reset and recovery response to COVID-19. Actions 2 to 7 address the opportunities and challenges identified in the town centre, and on the high street, including Action 7, will take account of changes that may arise from the air quality management area on Market Hill. I'll hand back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Longman. Leader, would you like to come back on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
I've got some speakers noted, but I wondered whether you wanted to say anything before we hear speakers.
Well, Chairman, I will go to the recommendations and propose, Chairman, that Council agrees recommendation 1 and that Council agrees recommendation 2, Chairman. But I think there's a typo in there. I think we need to remove the word of. That the council endorses of. It doesn't really quite make sense, so I think we need to change that, Chairman, or at least delete that word. And with regards to recommendation 3, Chairman, I would propose that the 2 members appointed to the group, the focus group, are Councillor Fleming, Chairman, and Councillor Nunn. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Thompson.
Thank you. Now, the first speaker I've got was Councillor Bamford, followed by Councillor Hurd. Councillor Bamford.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just to say this is very welcome, but my emphasis wanted to be on market, because Maldon is a market town. So I have been on the market working group before, and we have looked at the lower high street for the market, and I wouldn't want the fact that we need to keep a market in Maldon to be overlooked with this lower high street strategy, and also the town centre strategy, which is mentioned on page 34, where it does mention improvements to Butt Lane car park. So really, to just emphasise, please, that we don't forget that Maldon is a market town, and we need to retain a good market somewhere in the high street area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bamford. Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this particular item speaks for itself. It is Maldon High Street, and whilst I have every respect for Councillor Fleming, I do think that if this proposal for these nominations fail, then I would certainly like to have Councillor Nunn and Councillor Mays, who are the ward members for Maldon North, and the High Street embraces theirs. And I would ask members to bear in mind that if there was an issue for a bridle path in Purley, I'm sure Councillor White would be the first one to object to anybody else taking on that mantle. And the same thing if there was a matter in Southminster, I'm sure the leader would want to take that. So I do hope that members realise that this is Maldon High Street. The best people to look at those interests, with respect, great respect to Councillor Fleming, should be the two ward members, which is Councillor Nunn and Councillor Mays. Thank you.
Tara, could I be reminded of who Councillor Fluker's nominations were?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Fluker nominated Councillor Mrs Fleming and Councillor Nunn.
And Councillor Hurd has proposed Councillor Nunn and Mays.
I don't think he's actually proposed, Chairman.
Oh, yes. No, that's right. He said if that fails.
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. So he wants me to take that as a right. I'm willing to do that. That's fine. Leader, do you wish to say anything else, or I mean, members of the council? There is 3 recommendations, which I'm assuming the consensus is that they would be agreed. The only issue that we might have is the vote on who the focus group members would be. So can I assume that members are agreeing recommendation 1, 2 and 3? Agreed.
No.
Agreed. Who said no?
No.
No, we're not agreeing recommendation little 3, Chairman. Councillor Stamp, I'd recommend take a vote on recommendations 1 and 2, but not 3. No.
I did say that 1, 2 and 3, the 3 is only saying that there should be 2 members appointed. There would be a vote after 3 for who those members were. So okay, are you suggesting that you wish a vote to be taken on recommendation 3?
Apologies, Chairman, I misheard you. The internet is absolutely awful at the moment. You're breaking up tremendously as well.
So
yes,
turning the camera off hasn't made a difference.
But yeah, Chairman, I agree with it in principle, but I don't agree with the recommendations of the 2 members that have been proposed by the leader. Just for clarity.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay.
And Chairman, just to advise, Councillor Swain and Councillor Fleming have asked to speak on this.
All right. Okay. Councillor Swain first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I do want to separate out these recommendations. With a separate vote, perhaps, although I think probably mostly they will have a general agreement, but I'm going to abstain on, I want to abstain on the recommendation 2 for various reasons, which I will come to when I can speak later. Thank you.
Well, speak now, because we're debating the recommendations at the moment.
Do you wish me to continue then?
Yes, please.
Right. With apologies to Councillor Fleming, this may take a little time, but I wanted to inject an element of realism in this particular item. There are a number of smaller scale things in there which are quite commendable, on signage, way marking, cycling facilities and so on, and signage for the 288 to act as a park and ride. But I think it is an illusion to see the prom visitors as a great untapped visitor base for the High Street or the Lower Street. And the promotion of the Lower Street as a place for food and drink seems to be rather at odds with the District Council's activity and interests in providing adequate food and drink in the Prom Park. To me, the problems of the Lower High Street really are the same problems of the Upper High Street, which is to attract new kinds of businesses and cultural activities. I'm wary of interest groups in this pushing forward for things like traffic regulation, one-way systems and pedestrianisation, and the emphasis on walking and cycling. The people that I come across on the buses getting up to the High Street are not going to be walking there. They're certainly not going to be cycling. You can't ignore the facts of geography in Malden and its High Street. The one thing that is needed is better park and ride facilities generally, and this seems to have been omitted or ignored in the LDP process. And I think we need to look and work for park and rides locations, new ones perhaps, that can utilise the existing bus services. So because of these reasons, I'm not going to vote against, but I don't support the action plan as such. Thank you.
Mrs. Longman, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chairman. The Lower High Street Action Plan is one of 18 projects in the master plan that supplements policy S5 in the LDP. The master plan was adopted in 2017, and this action plan has taken account of changing behaviours through the COVID response. People are doing more walking and cycling. We've also considered the parking strategy that is within the master plan, and the actions in this action plan will consider that parking strategy and how people access the town centre, whether that's by bus, walking, by car or by cycle. And it does set out a whole strategy for how that can be enabled through the master plan. So the park and ride, you mentioned the 288 bus, the park and ride facility, the new one down at the leisure centre, the park and stride to change the dynamic of how people arrive into the town centre, perhaps using Pond Park as a car park, and then walking up via the Lower High Street to the upper and middle sections. So if you just refer to page 35 of your pack and the paragraphs 8.2 to 8.7, they do set out that the action plan has considered those issues that you mentioned, Councillor Swain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I note independent colleagues' comments about me going onto the focus group. Normally, I would agree with the ward members being represented, but the point I'd like to make is that Malden High Street is used by everybody in the district. So I don't feel that it's relevant here because we all use Malden High Street and visit Malden High Street. So I think that we should have representation from not just the ward members, but somebody else. I also want to reassure members that although I live on a farm and in a rural location, I am actually from a town, and I also come from many generations of shop and business people. So I want to do this because I feel that I will really, add value. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other speakers, Tara?
No, Chairman, not that I'm aware of.
Right, Leader, would you like to sum up, please? And then we'll take the votes.
Thank you, Chairman, and I think thank you very much to Councillor Fleming for her input, because clearly the whole idea of the High Street is to make it right, fit and proper for everybody in the district to use. It is so important, it's a very special High Street. I thoroughly enjoy coming from Southminster, and I'm sure Councillor White enjoys coming from Purley to the High Street to use the facilities there, and that's why it's so important that we embrace the High Street as a district. And that said, Chairman, I think we can probably, Chairman, I'm not sure if we have agreed recommendations 1 and 2, but if we haven't, I would propose that we agree them subject to the minor amendment I suggested, and then go to recommendation 3, Chairman.
Yeah, I'm told Councillor Swain wants to come back on Mrs. Longman's comments. I will allow this, Councillor Swain, but you have had your say, but please be brief.
Yes, thank you. Very briefly, really, relevant to 1 or 2 of the previous comments, and that is we have to beware of that attracting visitors from outside to the High Street isn't at the inconvenience of residents of Malden, Heybridge and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Right then, members, can I assume that that there is a consensus to agree recommendations 1, 2 and 3, and we'll then move to the vote on who the membership should be?
Agreed.
Are members happy with that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right. Now,
will you, Chairman, note my abstention on recommendation 2, please?
I'm sure that the minute taker will note that. Yes.
Thank you.
So basically, what I have is a proposition for Councillors Fleming and Nunn, which Councillor Hurd has indicated that if that is lost, he will then propose another person. But I think it might be easier to have a vote with 3 names, and that's Fleming, Nunn and Mays, and the last one will fall out. Is that okay with everybody? Councillor Hurd?
Yes, Chairman. When you say the last one will fall out, do you mean in the least number of votes?
Yes, the least number of votes. Tara, is it a problem if every member has the opportunity to vote for 2 people, and by indicating the name of that person or the name of those 2 people, we will be able to proceed in that manner? Are you able to manage?
Yes, we can do that,
Chairman.
Yes, Chairman, we can do that.
Okay.
Chairman, points of order.
Councillor Leader.
Chairman, I think I made a proposal earlier on which was seconded, and I think it may be remiss of you not to put that proposal first. Thank you.
I agree.
Well,
agreed.
Chairman,
all right, we'll do it that way. I was just trying to save time. Right, there's a proposal made by the leader, seconded, that Councillor Fleming and Nunn be the representatives on the focus group. Tara, would you take the role on that basis, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, we'll call out the names alphabetically. If you could advise if you're for, against or abstaining, please. Starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Miss Beale?
For.
Councillor Brown wasn't here. Councillor Bell?
Sorry, can I just clarify? So this is including Councillor Nunn and Councillor Fleming. That's
yes.
That's basically okay. Against then.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
For Councillors Fleming and Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much. Councillor Durham.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Chairman, I've just got in. I've got terrible internet problems. I've just got into the system. I have no chat facility and I can't vote because I wasn't part of the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
4.
Councillor Harker.
4.
Councillor Hurd.
Against.
Councillor Helms.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Councillor Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
4.
Councillor Mays.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Both are good, so abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn.
Abstain.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Abstain.
Siddle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens.
Abstain.
Councillor Stamp.
Against.
Councillor Stilts.
Abstain.
Councillor Swain.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
4.
Councillor Miss White. Councillor Miss White. Oh, she may not still be with us, Chairman.
She's dropping in and out, Tara, anyway,
Yeah.
so it's very difficult.
Okay. Chairman, the result of that vote is 16 for, 3 against and 7 abstaining. Thank you.
Right, that's motions carried, and councillors Fleming and Nunn will be on the focus groups. Now, apart from the problems I'm having with the internet, I forgot to do agenda item 8, minutes of previous minutes of the council. So I'll go back to that, Tara, to note that since the last meeting of the council and up until Wednesday, the 8th of July, council agenda dispatch, the North Western Area Planning Committee had met on the 1st of July 2020 and to receive any questions in accordance with the council and committee procedure rule 6.2. Is there any questions? Okay, that concludes agenda item 8, and then we can now proceed to agenda item 11, Bradwell Development Plan Document Housing. Leader, would you please present it?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I think I'll give way to Mr. Lee, who I think is going to take us through the background of this report. And then if you can come to me with the recommendations, I'll be grateful.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman.
Muted.
Sorry, members, I'd moved the speaker part away from my mouth. Thank you, Chairman. Members obviously have got the report in front of them, and they'll be aware that previously in February of this year, the council's agreed to start to prepare a development plan document in relation to various impacts from the potential new nuclear power station at Bradwell. As members are fully aware, the new nuclear power station will not be determined by us as the council, and is a NSIP and is determined by the Secretary of State, and we will be consulted in that process. It's likely that a new nuclear power station is going to have impacts in relation to housing, employment and other matters, and that is what the point of the development plan document is to protect us in the future against adversarial developments and to give us some form of control over where these forms of development will be sited, located, and how we can ensure to mitigate harm and impacts. At the moment, the document is very much in its infancy, and a number of reports have been commissioned that have been necessary to be able to bring forward this document and to get it adopted through the formal process, because the decisions we make will need to be evidence-based, and these supporting documents will provide that evidence to be able to allow us to come to reasonable and informed judgments that are robust and defendable. However, as part of the process, officers have already considered that to look to gain maximum benefits and to ensure that it's sustainable development, that we should look to try to encourage the housing allocation within the district rather than potentially outside, because also that would make it a more difficult way to manage and mitigate. So that's already been something that has gone through an officer level. We would like members' endorsement of that, which is point 1. However, the second point, which I think is the more important one, is that officers would be very keen to get members' input at an early stage into the ideas and direction of travel in relation to housing. As I've already said, and as the report explains in numerous times, the final decision on matters such as this will need to be heavily influenced by the evidence base and by the facts that come out of these reports. But there may be some ideas that we wish to not look at if possible, or some that may be more favourable, and that all can go into the melting pot for us as the authority to come up with a decision. So for that reason, officers are requesting an agreement for a members' workshop to allow officers to explain some more context, and obviously this report has, and also to get some input and direction from members. And that is the recommendation too. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Leader, I've got several speakers. Do you wish to say anything before I come back to you?
Well, yeah, so, Chairman, to get the debate going, I think members need to be mindful of the fact that regardless of refusing the planning application to deal with the geological surveying, the DCO process is still continuing in the background at speed. And we really need to set ourselves up, Chairman, so that if this project does go ahead in the future, and Mr. Lee's absolutely quite right, that we will not be deciding whether it does or not, but what we need to do is protect the district. And I think to enable us to do that, we need to understand what officers want from members, and this is the opportunity to do it. So, Chairman, as far as the recommendations are concerned, I would propose that we agree recommendation 1, but with regards to recommendation 2, Chairman, I would propose a different recommendation, which hopefully Miss Bird has now got if she checks her email address. And my recommendation is as follows, Chairman, that workshops, because this recommendation actually at the moment just provides for one workshop, and I'm sure that members want more than one workshop. So that workshops are provided for all members at the earliest opportunity, Chairman, which will include the opportunity to provide comment on the principles of delivering housing to meet the need of Bradwell Power Station once operational. And that in advance of any such workshop, members are provided with background papers in a timely manner. Now, Chairman, that final sentence that I'll read again, and that in advance of any such workshops, members are provided with background papers in a timely manner. The reason why I'm proposing that we have that, Chairman, because we seem to be, with virtual meetings, we seem to be called into meetings, we get information up on the screens, members find it difficult, depending on what apparatus they're using, to be able to see the documents, to digest them, which would allow them to comment properly. So I think, Chairman, whilst I've proposed that we have that in this particular recommendation, it might be something that officers take into consideration when they set these work groups up. I know that several of us were in a pre-app yesterday, and again, it would have been useful if we'd had a lot of those papers in advance. But, Chairman, that's my 2 proposals, and I hope, given the circumstances, members will support them. Because we need to get on with this, because the alternative, Chairman, is if we don't start this process off and the DCO accelerates, as a lot of people are thinking it will do, we could then find ourselves open to speculative developments throughout the district, Chairman, and that really would fly in the face of the principles of our local development plan. Thank you.
Is that seconded, the revised recommendation?
Agreed.
Seconded.
Right, I now have Councillor Bamford first, then Councillor Lagan, then Councillor Dunn, then Councillor Swain. Bamford.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in total support of what the leader has said. I did sort of say I'd second. But I just wanted to emphasise something in the report on page 51, which is a very welcome approach. And that is to do with the fact that the officers will use their, well, I think they use the word encourage, that any permanent housing will not be delivered through the development consent order. And I think that's quite important that we sort of press that part of it. So that's the point I wanted to make, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Lagan.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Looking back for the minutes of on the 13th of February, where there was an agreement to go ahead with this work, my concern is that it's all a little bit premature. Obviously, we're talking as if this power station will happen, and with the political situation for the Chinese government and the UK government and the degree of a failing relationship, we can't be sure of that. With the also what concerns me is when we looked at this through a very long meeting on the 13th of February, on page 314, then we looked at some costings that were involved in potentially doing this work, and that costing came to £355,000. So I'm concerned at the moment that we may be spending money on doing preliminary works on something that may or may not happen. So I think that we should look at suspending or postponing at least this work, because I keep on hearing how busy everybody is, and yeah, this is going to take an awful lot of time and money, which is a real concern for me. There's also something in the report it talks about in section 3.2.3. We need more points. And it says it can help to secure an improved legacy for the district. Two things for me that stuck out in that statement, and members know my feelings on this, so I'm not going to wait, bang on for hours about it. But it says it can, but can does not mean it will. And I'm still stuck in a place where we go and do all of this amount of work for something that causes massive amounts of destruction and negativity across the district, and even the previous planning application, Chair, wasn't approved, and by unanimous vote by the members. So in section 3.3.5 of the report, which is a good report, it says it gives the detail for us to scrutinise, and that's our role. It mentions which is something that really interested me. It said that the income is extremely low in the district, which is quite a challenge, because on 3.3.6 it then talks about 71% of housing being 3 or more bedrooms. So then it gives me a degree of concern, is that would we consider that putting housing down at Bradwell to support a monstrously horrific nuclear power station development, which in my view would ruin the district, would they be cheaper level housing, which really puts people into a bit of a housing trap? Really, it also talks in 3.6.1 about penalties. So I found the tone of some of the report to be a little bit scaremongering, because it's all we can get penalised if we don't deliver the right housing in the right way. We've put in under 3.6.2, our LDP said we're going to deliver 4,650 dwellings. Well, let's deliver them, and let's see what the decision is based on what the government say, because as the leader and as Matt has said, it's really not our decision. And I agree we need to do some pragmatic works, but I think we're going a little bit too quickly down a road that really is going to, from my humblest of views, be a disaster for us as a district. And also, in my conclusion, Chair, in section 4.1, there's it says in the conclusion, it says in 6.3 of that conclusion, it says implications risk none. I'm not sure that I actually agree with there is no risk implications from a fiscal or a security or a health and safety or a financial or a growth measure for the whole of the district. So they're my concerns, and I can't support the recommendations, and I would fear the recommendation to know the report and to revisit the work when needed, when a bit more clarity is gained through the situation to do with the government.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn.
Here.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Lagan has stolen my thunder, Chairman. I agree with him that this is premature. I have no problem at all with workshops, but don't think we should proceed beyond workshops at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to this question about whether we can defer any action or not, I would like some clarification as to how the work on this document fits within the timetable of both the LDP and the anticipated schedule for the power station consent. How that fits in depends on whether this can be considered premature or not. But I have a more fundamental, what should we say, dispute with this, and that is that it says in both two places that the housing needs should be met within the district. I think this is quite wrong. I think it's far more relevant to consider Southminster than Great Braxted. And in the area that is affected or would be providing houses should be much wider. I agree this is going to make things a lot more complicated for the planners, but it is quite unreasonable to expect all the anticipated housing to be in the district.
Very boring.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. I believe, I'm sure one of the officers can confirm that I think this work is being, in any case, partially funded by BRB. But my point, and the leader and Councillor Bamford have already made it, but I can't emphasise enough, if we don't have this ready when we need it, we will have no control over any of it. We can't control whether we have a power station or not, but if we do, and I mean, I must admit, I'm becoming less keen on it with every passing day, but I want to be realistic about what we can control and what we can't. And if we're going to need new housing or park and ride or whatever, we need to be able to control what we have and where we have it. And that would, I hope, cover some of Councillor Lagan's concerns about the size of houses, type, affordability, etc. We can't leave it for the DCO process that happens at central government level and will be influenced almost entirely by BRB if that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Lagan just reminded me that I had read something in the report that I considered to be inaccurate. 3.3.5, page 51, it says, firstly, income levels for those residents currently working in the district are considered extremely low. That's not my understanding. Everything I've read is that mean income levels are, compared to the rest of the country, high. I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Councillor Hurd.
Yeah, I'm referring to 3.7.2 on page 53. Can we just confirm that this development is not part of the LDP? And I'm wondering why we've got reference to the 5-year housing land supply. If we didn't have this, it shouldn't make any difference, should it? Because this would be a windfall.
Mr. Lee, there's a question for you immediately there. Mr. Lee?
Yep, sorry, I'm trying to get the technology to work. To be honest, it's a little difficult just to answer that question in isolation. It does feed into a number of the various points that have been raised. So I don't know if you want to carry on and then come back to me. I'll talk it in the whole, or maybe pick up now.
Yeah, okay, we'll do. Thank you. Now the final speaker I've got is Councillor Durham. Councillor Durham.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I think the whole point about this is notwithstanding the vote the other day, this sort of exercise takes a very long time to get any sort of conclusion to it. And we need to start it straight away. Although, of course, we know there's a chance, albeit a small one, in my opinion, that the power station won't go ahead. We've got to be able to dictate that we have the right homes, the right time, and in the right place. And that work has to start. Otherwise, if we end up having to do it when our back's against the wall, we won't have a chance to deliberate properly. So I will support this recommendation. We need to get cracking. We need to do it now.
Thank you. Leader, would you like to sum up?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think I can see where the consensus is going, and it is absolutely important that we get on with this. There was a question about resources, and I think that's dealt with resources financial, which is dealt with in implication, Chairman, paragraph 6.4, where it says the only potential cost will be defending planning appeals. If we don't get on with this, because we just know where our developers are going to go next. And as I said earlier, Chairman, the DCO process is still continuing at speed in the background. And Councillor Bamford is absolutely right. If we don't do something and we don't get on with it, what could actually happen is that the DCO could determine where we have these houses. And you know, I'm grateful for Councillor Swain's comments about Southminster, but they're as likely to go in Malden East as they are in Burnham or anywhere else. So we need to have some control over this. And you know,
Leader, you've dropped out.
Chairman, I think I'm back in now.
Well, can I just pause you there? Because I think Mr. Lee wants to come back to cover a few points before you do your final summing up.
Chairman, I'll give way to Mr. Lee, and I just hope that it wasn't him who muted me, because I'm going to check.
I can guarantee I'd never mute any member, however much I wanted to. Thank you, Chairman. I'd start off, members, by obviously quoting someone much more intelligent than myself about hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. And to a certain extent, I think the point of this DPD is exactly that. A development plan document, as I explained, you know, needs evidence which has already been started to be commissioned. So, and we've signed agreements with that. So actually pausing it would not really make any savings in that respect, but that's a bit of a moot point. The point is that the generation of a document such as this takes 18 months to 2 years. There is a need for us to start to prepare for this if and when the DCO is granted. If we wait until that stage, we will not be able to protect the district. We will have an extended period where adversarial planning applications will be coming in where applicants wish to put them. We will not be able to really have much of a defence to them because there will be an acknowledged need for housing. And I think that ties into Councillor Hurd's query about why is the LDP referenced, because the LDP takes into account the predicted housing demand for the next 15 years. It does not take into account the predicted housing demand and Bradwell nuclear power station. And when the DCO is granted, if it is granted, that will be a material consideration in every plan application. That will monumentally change the expected housing demands for the district. So therefore, the 4,500 that we've got granted and being built out will not be enough, and therefore there will be a demand, and every applicant, every developer is going to be able to argue that and show that we are failing to meet our 5-year land supply. If the council can't demonstrate a 5-year land supply, all our policies in relation to housing location fall away, and it all becomes back to sustainable development. And I'm sure most of the members that, particularly in South East and North West, that were here 4 or 5 years ago and a little bit longer, remember how difficult that is, remember how challenging that is. We really have had over that time some applications for pretty large scale developments that as officers and members, we really try to resist, forced upon us by pins. And if we don't do the preparation work that we need to do to protect ourselves from adversarial applications, we will end up in a situation worse than we were. And that is my honest professional judgment. This isn't saying we support the idea of a nuclear power station. This isn't even saying it will or won't come. What this is just is us getting ready to actually be able to deal with the situation as and when it progresses. But as I said, these documents take 18 months, 2 years to progress. And if we don't start now, we will not be ready at the time of the DCO process. Thank you, Chairman. The only other points I want to say is that was in relation to the wages points, that's actually just taken from our SHLA, which is stating that the salaries for people within the district are quite low compared to, I think it's Essex. But that's actually from one of our adopted documents. But I think that was really covering all the points. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Back to you, Leader, for your completion of your summing up.
Okay, Chairman. So I think we dealt with resources. We dealt with the DCO, who could actually determine where these houses go if we don't do something. Should the project go ahead? And I was just going to respond to something Councillor Nunn said about beyond workshops. The whole idea of this is, Chairman, or members, is to hold these workshops, get members' views, come back to council and get some kind of an endorsement from council as to what we want to do. Now, anybody that was on the council during the local development plan process will know how complicated that is to do it. We're talking of probably an 18-month or 2-year process. There'll be public consultations regarding this DPD. It's going to take time. And if we don't get going now, just with this little bit of, what we're trying to do now is just have a couple of workshops with all members so that we can understand everybody's ideas about this, so that we can take it to the next stage. Everything will be reported back through council. We're not endorsing a new power station. What we're actually doing is protecting ourselves, Chairman. Now, Chairman, I've made a proposal that we agree recommendation number 1, but I made a more inclusive recommendation with regards to number 2.
Leader, Tara informs me she's able to put that up on the screen.
Yeah, well, I've sent it to her by email, so I'm beginning to get the hang of this now. Oh, there we go. Look, you've amended the one that I amended. So, Chairman, it says that workshops be provided for all members at the earliest opportunity, which will include the opportunity to provide comment on the principles of delivering housing to meet the need of Bradwell Power Station once operational, and that in advance of any such workshops, members are provided with background papers in a timely manner. Now, to me, Chairman, we've got 2 very sensible recommendations there, and they've been proposed and seconded, and I'd ask that you put the question now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Members can see that. Are you willing to accept these 2 recommendations, or do you wish me to carry out a vote?
Agree.
Agreed.
Vote, please. Recorded vote under 13. Thank you.
I have got a call. I have got a call for a vote. Tara, will you take the roll, please?
Chairman.
Councillor Swain.
Is there now a conflict between the first and the second? The first one says housing to be let within the district, but the second one opens the possibility of discussing a wider area of housing and where people come from.
I don't think that. I thought the intention was all within the district. We only have any control over within our district, Councillor Swain. Tara, will you take the roll, please?
Will you vote on each recommendation separately, please, Chair?
Yes, Tara, each one Chairman. Separately.
Okay, Chairman, no problem. So on recommendation 1, do you want me to put those up on the screen again, Chairman? Would that be helpful?
No, I think you can.
Yes, please.
Just take the roll on this one.
Yes, please.
On the screen, please, Tara.
There we go. Recommendation 1. Members, if you could just advise for, against, abstain, please. Starting with Councillor Bamford.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Bassinger. Sorry, he's not present. Councillor Beale.
For.
Councillor Bell.
Against.
Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Mrs. Channer.
For.
Councillor Durham.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Fluker.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Harker.
For.
Councillor Hurd.
Against.
Councillor Helm.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Keys.
For.
Councillor Lagan.
Against, please, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Mays. Councillor Mays.
For.
Thank you. Holly.
Oh, for.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Nunn.
Against.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
For.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens.
Against.
Councillor Stamp.
Sadly, for.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
For.
Councillor Swain.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor White. Chairman, the result of that vote in relation to recommendation 1 is 17 for, 9 against and 1 abstention.
That carried.
Thank you.
Call the roll for the recommendation 2, please.
Yes, of course. Again, as before, members, starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Miss Beale.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Channer.
For, Tara. For.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Harker.
For.
Councillor Hurd.
For.
Councillor Helm.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Keys.
For.
Councillor Lagan.
Against.
Councillor Mays.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
For.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Skeens.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
For.
Councillor Stilts.
For.
Swain.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White wasn't voted last time. So, Chairman, the result of the vote for recommendation 2 as amended was 22 for, 3 against and 2 abstentions.
That is carried. Thank you, Tara. We'll now move on to agenda item 12, appointment to vacant seats on committees, contained on pages 61 to 62. Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I think it will probably be easier to do this in two, as per the recommendations. So, Chairman, with regards to recommendation 1, I would propose, Chairman, that Councillor Durham is appointed to the Strategy and Resources Committee. Councillor Bamford is appointed to the Licensing Committee. Councillor Fleming is appointed to the Investigating and Disciplinary Committee. Councillor Siddle is appointed to the Investigating and Disciplinary Panel. Councillor Jarvis is appointed to the Corporate Governance Working Group. I so move, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. I think Councillor Hurd wants to speak on the nominations, but I think that really should be just a matter for reporting. Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand some of those nominations. However, I would like to make the point again. I have the greatest respect for Councillor Jarvis, but the Corporate Governance Working Party has but one independent member, and that is myself. And I would like to propose that Councillor Wendy Stamp goes on to this Corporate Governance Working Party in order to give representation not only to Burnham but also a bit more of a balance on the council.
Seconded.
Right. Does the council agree the first, is it 5 bullet points? Well, the first 5 bullet points, as I said, should just be for noting. Everybody happy with those?
Great.
To the first 4.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
So we now need to have a vote on the 5th bullet point. That's the Corporate Governance Working Party. There's 2 nominations, I think, Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Stamp. And I've got Councillor Jarvis wishing to speak now. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman, members. I've got the greatest respect for Councillor Stamp. This particular committee, though, I am keen, so this working group, I am keen to be involved with it. I do have quite a lot of experience in governance and got a chartered qualification in governance. And I think on behalf of the whole council, I'm very keen to have influence through that working group, because I think there are some governance issues that do need attention. So the greatest respect for Councillor Stamp, but in terms of representing and making change happen, I am very keen to be involved in this working group. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Well, we now had the first name that I had nominated was Councillor Jarvis. And so, Tara, if you'll call the roll on that. And what will happen, members, is if Councillor Jarvis, who was the first nomination I had, gets a majority vote, he will be the representative. If he fails to get the majority vote, we will then take a vote for Councillor Stamp. Is that understood, Tara?
Agreed.
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Stamp wants to speak, I should point out.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Stamp, please do so. You're perfectly entitled to do so as one of the nominees. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. I also have the greatest respect for Councillor Jarvis. But really, to try and get some balance back on these groups, Chairman, I don't think it should all be replaced by Conservative councillors. Councillor Fluker has been very vocal recently about sharing these responsibilities and roles. Well, this is a prime opportunity to actually share some of these roles to actually independent or non-aligned councillors. So I really welcome the opportunity and thank you for being nominated. I doubt if I stand a cat and L's chance, Chairman. But I do also think that I could contribute greatly on this Corporate Governance Working Party too.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp.
I appreciate you, Councillor Jarvis, too. So thank you.
Tara, would you call a roll, please? For those in favour of Councillor Jarvis. So again, it's straightforward, 4 against, abstain.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bamford.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Miss Beale.
4. And just to advise, I'm now leaving the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Against, but with the greatest respect.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
4.
Councillor Harker.
4.
Hurd.
Again, with respect to Councillor Jarvis, but against.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
I'm going to abstain because I don't wish to get in on my own vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
4.
Councillor Mays.
Against, with respect.
Morley.
4.
Councillor Morris.
Councillor Jarvis is excellent, but in interest of balance, against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nunn.
Abstain.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
It's a great shame that Councillor Stamp, who has got such good qualities, can't be a member of this group. However, I have to vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens.
I still can't see why she can't be another member, but against.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
I'm going to do the same as Councillor Jarvis. I'm going to abstain and not vote for myself, Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White, she's present. No, I think we've lost her. Chairman, the results of that vote are 14 for, 8 against and 5 abstentions. Thank you very much.
14 for, 8 against.
5
I
abstentions.
think that is Councillor Jarvis is elected. And thank you, everybody. That concludes. Oh no, there's the small 2 to deal with, isn't there? Little 2.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think you called me, but you're breaking up. I don't know if it's this end or not. Chairman, I think the first part of this is quite straightforward. So, Chairman, I would propose that Council agrees recommendation 2. I think that recommendation 3 is a little bit more complicated, and unless the monitoring officer's got something to say on it, I think I'd propose, Chairman, that the non-aligned members consult with the monitoring officer with regards to appointment of substitutes, because I'm not quite sure how that works. I read the government around this today, and it's not 100% clear, but I think this is one of
I can see your problem, leader, and I tend to agree. There are 3 people who are not a group, therefore it seems to answer itself. But yeah. I think Mr. Quelch needs to be consulted on this.
Later. Chairman, I agree with you, and you know, this is why I had great concerns about this. I'm a great supporter of what we're trying to achieve here, but right from the beginning, it's the governance that concerns me going forward. So, Chairman, I'll certainly. I propose we agree. I propose. Is that your dog barking, Chairman? I propose that
one of many.
I propose that we agree recommendation 2, but I think, and you might want to put that to council, but recommendation 3, I think we need a little bit more on that with regards to the monitoring officer. Thank you.
I've got 2 speakers. I've got Councillor Stamp and Councillor Morris. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's very difficult to put motion little 2 before and separate to little 3. If you actually read what the motion and the agreement was, a political group is defined by having 3 or more members. I think you'll find 2 independent non-aligned is 2 and 1 non-aligned is 1, and they're separate. They're not in a group. And while Councillor Fluker was, like I said earlier, very vocal about trying to be inclusive for everything, it's a shame he didn't actually carry that through on 2 little 1. About trying to include other members than the Conservatives on those groups. But we are where we are, as Councillor Fluker says loads and loads of times. I don't think, and it said it's not supposed to be politically imbalanced. This is an imbalance, and to qualify to be on this group, then you've got 8 members, it should be 4-4. If in September, when the statutory annual takes place, Chairman, and the groups do change and you've got 3 or more to be constituted as a recognised political group, then fine. This group can also be then, new members can be proposed and put on there. But it stands at the moment, Chairman, it's got to be 4 independents and 4 Conservatives. Otherwise, it makes a mockery of the debate we had on the 23rd of June. And Councillor Fluker, you can most probably say this is why you was concerned. We did put the option forward for the officers to actually help and get involved to make sure this was watertight. And the essence is correct. We are supposed to be trying to be more inclusive with everybody to get an equal say on this council. But yet again, you have proved on 2, little 1, that you actually don't practice what you preach. Thank you, Chairman.
I've got Mr. Quelch wishes to come in. Mr. Quelch, and I may disagree with you. Mr. Quelch.
Yes, thank you for telling me in advance, Chairman. You may disagree. That's very good. Yes, on this little 2, we're bound by the agreed minutes of the 23rd of June Council, and that says for motion 3 that 8 members should reflect the balance of the membership of the council. Now, I know that motion 2 had already said that political balance provisions should be waived. In other words, the actual strict adherence as the regulations set things out. But then motion 3 makes it clear that the 8 members should reflect the balance of the membership of the council. However, no group should have a majority on the committee. The motion then goes on to define group as 3 or more members. So, I mean, I take it trying to interpret the motions, and I admit they weren't as straightforward as we would have liked them to have been. That relates to no group should have a majority on the committee. So that's just defining group for those purposes. The principal part of motion 3, as I read it, is that the 8 members should reflect the balance of the membership of the council. Now, that means you've got to take account of the composition of the whole council. So we have 2 groups with the Conservatives have, I understand, 51% of the membership. The independents have 39%, and then there are the non-aligned members who are not a group for political balance purposes, nor within the confines of these motions, but they are still membership of the council. And so following the actual wording of motion 3, I don't think, unless the council is going to change its motion entirely, that it has to be 4-3-1. Now, in relation to little 3, Chairman, if I may just take the chance of dealing with that one as well, because political balance provisions have been waived, I think there is a liberty there. There is a freedom for someone other than a non-aligned member to be named as substitute. But obviously not a Conservative, because then that would go against the principle of the committee having no group having a majority. So it would have to be a non-aligned member or an independent.
Thank you, Mr. Quelch. Some of it I agree, some I don't, but I shall keep that to myself for now and let the council decide. I've got 6 speakers, starting with Councillor Stamp. Or have you already spoken? Yeah, I think you've already spoken.
I've already spoken. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Morris.
I would just like to point out that one of the councillors that is listed in little 2 has got a very good chance of being found to have brought the council into disrepute. Should we not be waiting to see what happens with the report that is 2 weeks overdue, I hasten to add, with everything that's gone on? Are we not being a little bit premature in trying to pull this all together?
Hear, hear.
Well, it's a question, but I don't think I need to answer that at the moment. Councillor Swain.
No, you wouldn't, would you, Bob?
Councillor Swain.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's the position of these non-aligned, this phrase that's crept in here about a recognised political entity. They are not a political entity, and I don't think, if you consider the three people involved, that they would want to be considered as a political entity. So I think they fall outside the arrangements for political, well, not political balance, but avoiding a majority for any one party. There are only two entities in this, and that is the Conservative group and the Independent group. And to have a non-aligned person chosen by the council, or for the council to designate an alternative one, is a bit farcical. So I think one has to exclude the three from the balance or composition of the JSC.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. I've got this thing going through my head, and I deliberated whether I should speak in this way or not. But we just got to build a bridge and get over ourselves. You know, this waffle and tosh and politics that's going on in this council is absolutely disgraceful. I have no problem being on this committee or not being on this committee, being honest. You know, as an elected member, like everybody who sits in the chamber when we can, we're there to represent the people when we're playing games and politics. So let's not do that. Let's stop that. Simon Quelch has spoke well, and he said about the makeup of the council rather than the political group. I would be very grateful to serve on the committee until September if council decides. I won't lose any sleep if I don't, but you all need to start to have a blooming good look in the mirror and start to vote for what you think is right rather than the political fervour that's going on here. Thank you.
I second that, Councillor Langan.
Councillor Siddle. Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, just the technology, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I wrote the motion, and the motion stipulates, and it's what Councillor Stamp has just said, that the group is a group of three people that has a leader and that meets as a group. The three non-aligned members are not a group. So therefore, and I appreciate Councillor Lagan's unanimity by saying what he's just said, and I think he would be an asset to this particular committee if he was part of it. However, the way the council is constituted currently is two political groups. So therefore, it should be at the moment 4 Conservatives and 4 Independents who are part of the Independent group. It's quite simple. We are playing semantics here, and this to me is just trying to create barriers for this committee to move forward and do its job. And that's what we should be focusing on, not this strange trying to create barriers and problems. We need to ensure that this committee is formed and gets on with its job.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I seem to recall Councillor Siddle's vote was to motion specifically did not exclude non-aligned members. I mean, I don't have the slightest problem with Councillor Lagan being a member of this committee, bearing in mind that I'm one of the ones on the list, and therefore I'd be sitting with him if this goes ahead, and I'd be perfectly happy with that. But I'm sorry, I said it at the time. It was a badly written motion, with apologies to Councillor Siddle and Councillor Stamp. Councillor Fluker actually came up with one that would work because it had the potential for a slightly variable. It was either 7 or 8 number of people sitting on it, so that in fact the situation couldn't arise where either group has a majority. The point is, if that Councillor Lagan isn't available, then we're back to the very thing we were trying to avoid in the first place, which is one group having a majority over the other. I think the whole thing should, unfortunately, the committee probably needs to sit, but actually it should all go back to be looked at again and come up with something that will actually work. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
Lag available, I'll jump in.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that I certainly understood that the balance, read the motions, and I understood the balance was going to be 4 and 4. And when, with the greatest respect to Councillor Lagan, who I think would be an asset to the group, I was surprised at the way it was interpreted by Mr. Quelch. I did call him and we spoke about this, and I do understand that there's difficulty, there is some difficulty in the wording of the motion, but I think on balance, quite clearly, the motion was Councillor Stamp's and Councillor Siddle's. And I think, if the majority of people clearly have an understanding that it would be 4 and 4, and that is the most practical way to operate it, I would move that that's how, in fact, councillors interpret it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got Mrs. Stamp who wants to come back. Councillor Hurd and then Councillor Fleming. Then I'll bring this to a conclusion. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. Can I just remind the members, and thank you for Councillor Thompson and everybody else who's now deciding to say whatever they wish to say, which is their democratic right. The reason behind this motion was because of the way the Standards Committee was possibly going to be taken forward, that was reflected more in a better light. Can we focus back on that? The whole idea of this motion, whether it wasn't superbly written, I mean, don't forget some of us are still fairly new councillors, but we did actually ask for advice and we were welcoming on it. Yeah, so please don't criticise the motion. If you could write it better, then I suggest you do write it better, members, whoever feels it's not a good enough motion. The idea behind it, Chairman, is that we can actually have a fair and balanced council to look at any indiscrepancies, misdemeanours, issues, and it's dealt with fairly, not with a political hammer. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chairman.
Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I echo what Councillor Stamp has said, because this motion was written in the spirit of neutrality and balance. And in order to protect the reputation of this council, to have a 4 and 4 committee of those recognised groups, whether they be political or not, but the 2 recognised groups, and that's why I would agree that it should be 4 and 4. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we just rewind to Mr. Quelch's comments? I understood it that he said that the non-aligned could sit on the committee, but could only sub with an independent.
No.
For me,
No. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
So could Mr. Quelch just confirm what he was saying about that?
Mr. Quelch, would you like to come back and explain?
Yeah, this is a very difficult motion. It really is. And just to clarify, Chairman, I'm not playing semantics, as was suggested. I'm trying to make sense of what I think is a very difficult motion passed by council. So what I meant was that the substitute for the non-aligned member, because members took away the political balance provisions, I think there probably is a leeway for that not to be a non-aligned person. But it can't be a Conservative because of the wording of the motion. But I think it could be an independent. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it should be. I'm saying I think there's freedom for it to be so if members want that.
Thank you, Mr. Quelch.
So I'm fine with that. I just want
I've got the consensus of the council that I believe that they think it should be 4 and 4. I have to say, I told Mrs. Stamp when she approached me before the meeting that I thought that it was a bad governance at what she was proposing, but the intentions were quite clear to me that it should be 4 and 4. Now, having said that, are you happy, Council, to that I make a ruling that it is 4 and 4, or do you wish to take this to a vote?
Agreed.
4 and 4.
Agreed. Okay.
4 and 4.
In that case,
Agreed.
if that's accepted,
4 and 4, agreed.
Then,
4 and 4.
Miss Councillor Hurd, would you give me the 4th name to add to that list?
I'll do that with pleasure, Chairman. It will be Councillor Wendy Stamp.
Thank you. And that also, in that case, that does away with the necessity to deal with little item 3. So, Leader, coming back to you, I'm sorry to have imposed my will on you on this, but the names will be as you've laid out, with the addition of Mrs. Stamp. Are you happy with that, Leader?
Yeah, I'm more than happy with that, and I'd also like to thank Councillor Lagan for volunteering to be the non-aligned, and also to his substitute as well. But I mean, we have a complete different interpretation now from the monitoring officer, so I can only apologise to members for the way this report was brought forward, because I think if we'd done this before the report came forward, then it would have saved an awful lot of time. But I'm more than content with this. It's all to do with openness, transparency and fairness, and I agree this committee needs to meet.
Councillor Morris has asked to speak. The decision in my mind has been taken and the council has agreed, but Councillor Morris, please have your say.
I'm just a little concerned that one of the councillors that is named in this has been or will be found to have been part a predetermined decision that brought the council into
well, you can say it, but it's not viable because this has nothing to do with this. This item is to do with the constitution of the standards committee.
They should be omitted. They should be omitted. If they have brought the council into district, they should be omitted.
Councillor Morris, please turn your video off. I'll now go on to agenda item 3, medium-term financial strategy.
Another
contained on pages 63 to 98. And Leader, would you make the
Chairman, sorry,
please?
Chairman, Chairman, I think the council probably just going back to the previous item, they need to just vote on the membership of the Joint Standards Committee with the amendment to take out the non-aligned member and add in Councillor Stamp.
Yeah,
please, if that's okay.
I thought
they agreed it.
I think we agreed it, Chairman.
We did agree it, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought
Can we have it?
I want a recorded vote on it. Recorded vote on it.
Is that seconded?
It's too important.
Is that seconded?
The motion's
is a recorded vote seconded?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, seconded.
Right. Recorded vote, Tara.
Members. If you can just indicate for, against or abstain, please.
Can you explain exactly what we're voting on again, and with the names involved?
Yeah, bear with me. I can put it on the screen. So it's this recommendation 2. The membership appointments are made to the Joint Standards Committee in accordance with the nominations of the 2 political groups, taking out the bit about the non-aligned member based on the following nominations. So for Conservatives, which is Councillor Helm, Councillor Mrs Channer, Councillor Mrs Thompson, Councillor Jarvis. For Independents, Councillor Nunn, Councillor Mays, Councillor Bassinger, Councillor Stamp. And then the parish councillors, John Anderson and Town Councillor Peter Stilts, and an independent person from a pool of 3.
Okay, is that understood by everybody?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Take the vote then.
Okay, starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger. Oh, sorry, he's not present. Councillor Beale. She's left the meeting. Sorry, apologies, Chairman. Councillor Bell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
4. I did wish to speak earlier, but never mind.
Councillor Durham.
4.
Councillor Edwards.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
4.
Councillor Fluker.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Harker.
Abstain.
Hurd.
4.
Councillor Helm.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
4.
Councillor Jarvis.
4.
Keys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
The joy of being non-aligned is you can vote whichever way you want, so 4.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
With Councillor Anderson on that, he shouldn't be allowed near a sandpit. So I'm going to have to vote against. If Anderson weren't on it, I would be voting for.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Nunn.
4.
You, Councillor Shaughnessy.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens.
With reservations, 4.
Councillor Stamp.
Sorry, Tara, I was writing. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
4. Sorry, 4.
And Councillor Miss White, if she's still with us.
I think she's gone.
Yeah, Chairman, the results of that vote are 23 for, 1 against and 2 abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's carried, therefore. And now we can go on to agenda item 13, medium-term financial strategy on pages 63 to 98. Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Before I hand over to the Director of Resources and 151 Officer, Mr. Leslie, can I, on behalf of all members, Chairman, pay tribute to what the Finance and Resources Department have done over the last 5 months. They've done an enormous amount of work that's gone into producing this report, and bearing in mind they're also dealing with business as usual and the additional work which they've had to take because of the health emergency. And just to prove what they've actually achieved, this department, Chairman, we are the first council in Essex to close down our accounts for the year 1920. So I'm pleased to say that that's moving along as well. So a very, very in-depth report. Chairman, through you, I'm going to hand over now to Chris Leslie just to go through the headlines. I'm afraid that they're not good, but through you, Chairman, I'll defer to Mr. Leslie. Thank you.
Mr. Leslie.
Hi. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Leader. Just to talk through the report for you, an estimate of the in-year financial impact of COVID-19 was presented to Council in May, where it was agreed that a revised medium-term financial strategy would be prepared to show the indicative medium-term effect and impact on the general fund. Since May, members have been made aware of additional COVID-19 in-year pressures, including confidential ones, where there are confidential forums to discuss those. I would draw members' attention to Table 1 of the report, which is at paragraph 4.1. And that table totals those COVID-19 pressures and adds other variances identified as part of the medium-term financial strategy review. This shows the total additional pressures in each year of the MTFS. There is an expectation that some of these pressures are a worst case scenario, but others, such as car parking income, are dependent on future activity and can't be accurately predicted, so could be better or could be worse. This, of course, isn't a unique situation to Maldon. Additionally, on the 2nd of July, a government announced further funding to support income losses, and this is mentioned at paragraph 4.8 of the report. Details are still to be released, so it's currently unclear how much Maldon will receive, and as such no estimate has been included in these figures, so the potential for these figures to improve as a result of that. Also like to move on to table 2 of the report, which is at paragraph 4.4, and this adds those pressures from table 1 to February's medium-term financial strategy, which was approved by Council, to produce a revised general fund balance. It's worth noting that without the savings achieved through the transformation programme, the position would be worse. Now, the minimum general fund level is set at 2.6 million. COVID-19 is an example of why there is a minimum level, and the reduction of the balance below that 2.6 million in response to COVID-19 would be justified. However, a plan to replenish the general fund balance would need to be put in place should it fall below that minimum level. To highlight for you that at the bottom of table 2, there is a row entitled Balance Without Additional Drawdown, and this shows the position without those new COVID-19 pressures and how the general fund would be sustainably maintained above 2.6 million in the medium term, should we have not had that impact of COVID-19. There are, of course, these are, of course, projections on a do-nothing basis with no additional savings or income assumed, and relying completely on the general fund balance to fund the costs. Indeed, section 5 of the report sets out some high-level next steps in terms of future actions to address this. Also, the outturn report is being drafted and will be presented to Council on the 6th of August, and will report, in fact, a better general fund position than the 4.8 million projected. Additionally, earmarked reserves are also higher and will be reviewed for the potential to support the cost pressures and invest in the recovery. So, in summary, the financial impact of COVID-19 can't be accurately projected at this stage. However, we know it will be significant and it will be constantly monitored and reported. It is important at this time that plans begin to be put in place to commence this financial recovery and that these come forward to members for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Leader, before I come back to you, do you want to say anything before I go to members?
Well, Chairman, the recommendation is straightforward, and I would propose at this stage that we agree it, Chairman, and then obviously Mr. Leslie's bringing forward a lot more information for Council on the 6th of August, and obviously we look forward to that. But the recommendation really is to note the appendix. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
I second that, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Councillor Swain. Agreed. Councillor Swain.
Yes, I agree with that. But do you want? Can I give you my comments then? Questions? The paragraph 4.8, where it mentions about where losses are more than 5% council planned income, does that mean that we are maybe in line for more of a government support, which so far is 672,000? I wonder if it's possible to give a broad breakdown for next time as to how much of that is attributable to COVID-related activities and how much could be considered as compensating us for lost revenue. I note that the Corporate Projects Working Group met last week. Will we get the outcome of that working group shortly, or at least next time we're discussing anything financial? I compliment Mr. Leslie on the financial work that he's done, but I think even so we shouldn't underestimate the seriousness of the financial situation. And I think sooner or later we may have to look closely at what we are doing that we're not legally obliged to do, and to see if that is a source of any additional savings. This may be something for Strategy and Resources to look at, but I think members might appreciate knowing or having some idea what resources are going on these areas that we are not legally obliged to do. Thank you.
Councillor, Mr. Leslie, would you like to come back on those questions briefly, please?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you once again, Councillor Swain. Indeed, the pressures are significant, so I appreciate your support in highlighting that. With regards to additional funding, as soon as we've got the new details coming forward, hopefully they will be out soon, as I think the announcement was made a couple of weeks ago now. So once we've got those details, we'll be able to report back to members on that. It should be noted that we did get indeed £672,000 from the last tranche of grants. And that was part of a £3.2 billion funding injection by government. This funding injection is £500 million. So it remains to be seen what we get out of that, but obviously we will report that back to members. Of course, we will look at, as you quite rightly say, statutory, non-statutory obligations that the council has. I think that's it's a crucial part to understanding how the council operates and its services. So yes, absolutely take that on board. And again, with the working group side of it, I believe there is a reporting mechanism for the working groups. And of course, whatever comes out of those will be able to feed into the medium-term financial strategy going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Lagan. Councillor Lagan.
Sorry, can I just ask?
No, that's sufficient now, Councillor Swain. I think Mr. Leslie's answered your questions. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a very short one. It's actually, I've read the report and obviously it's not the best reading, and I commend Mr. Leslie really, and I wanted to say this on record, for the bluntness and the clarity and the expertise and the freshness that you brought there to make even a non-financial person understand the magnitude of the situation. So I just wanted to say that to you directly, Mr. Leslie, so thank you.
Councillor Siddle. Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, just getting there again, technology. Thank you, Chairman. One thing that this is to do with the forecasting. One thing that would be useful in terms of perspective is if we could have a review of the last quarter and how that compares with, and I'm not obviously, hopefully that can come to council next time, but how that compares to last year. So we have a year to date, so we can look at what last year was like and what this year's been like, along with the new government money, the grants coming in. So we've got an understanding of where we are at this present time, whether that could come to council next time.
Mr. Leslie.
Thank you. So part of the section 5 does look at next steps within there. One of them is a review of last year's, and obviously the outturn report will help with that, where we can look at where we've had some underspends. We can see if they're historic, and if indeed we can make some savings along those lines. Absolutely see what's achievable within those time frames, and that'll be part of our work, will be to look at actually historic spends, current spends, and how we're tracking as well. So it's something we'll be working on. We can look at presentation with that regard going forward, but that of course is a key part of budget monitoring. So,
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Leader, sum up, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, I think Mr. Leslie's answered all the questions, and it's clear from what the members have been saying that they've read this report. We are where we are with this. Just to reiterate what Councillor Stamp said earlier, but I would just pick up on one thing that Councillor Swain said. To reduce non-statutory services actually changes the way the district looks like. And I think that members, we should do everything we possibly can to not do that, and that we find ways of making this budget work. Now, the MHCLG have said that they will give us more funding, so hopefully that will be basically to cover our losses, which we understand could be income. So hopefully when we get to the 6th of August, we'll have a better understanding of exactly where we are. But I've got every faith in the directors to get through this, get us to the other side, so we can start building back and replenishing our finances. Chairman, I did propose the recommendation. I think it was seconded, and I'd ask that you put the question. Thank you.
Members, are you happy to agree this recommendation?
Agree.
Agree. Right, thank you. That is agreed by assent. or acclamation. We go on to agenda item 14, COVID-19 Reset and Recovery Member Working Group leader. On pages 99 to 102, leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this is a pretty straightforward report. Clearly, we are going to need a working group, Chairman, to look at all of the impacts on this. It will, of course, be reporting back to Council in the normal ways. As far as the recommendations are concerned, Chairman, with regards to recommendation 1, I'd propose that we agree that. And with regards to the other recommendation, Chairman, I would propose that we added an additional recommendation 3, which is basically a housekeeping issue, but nevertheless, I think it needs to go on in there because this group is going to do a lot of work which stretches across all aspects of council. So my proposal would be to add recommendation 3. And I would propose adding the following words: that following the first meeting of the working group, the terms of reference of the working group are agreed by council. Now, my understanding is, Chairman, that council's meeting on the 6th of August, this working group will be called probably in the next week or so. They can look at their terms of reference and then they can come back and have those approved by council. And if council aren't happy, then they can be adjusted. And of course, Chairman, I'm now going to go to the King. I'm now going to the recommendation 2, Chairman, and that council appoints 6 member representatives to the working group, Chairman, and I would propose, Chairman, that the following councillors are appointed to the working group: Councillors Fluker, Fleming, Siddle, Channer, Stilts, and Councillor Wendy Stamp, with my endorsement, Chairman. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
Chairman.
Seconded. Yeah,
I think there was.
I've got speakers. I just need to have the motion seconded.
I think we got the wrong people, Chairman.
Sorry?
I think we have the wrong nominations. It should be Councillor Mays and Councillor Stilts.
Chairman, that being the case, I obviously misheard, Chairman, what my friend, the Leader of the Opposition, told me today, and I apologise. So, Chairman, I'll withdraw my previous recommendation, and the following members I propose are elected: Councillor Fluker, Fleming, Siddle, Channer, Mays and Stilts, Chairman, and I hope that satisfies Councillor Hurd. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Councillor Swain, you wish to speak?
Great.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Looking at the list of things for this group, there is a lot of work there, but I think there's too much work there, particularly when it includes financial recovery and economic progress or commercial progress. I would see this as quite a separate and important working group in its own. So I would prefer this to be 2 working groups, one dealing with the financial and economic strategy, and the other with the remaining 4 items in the list of terms of reference.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Sorry?
Councillor Lagan.
Yes, sorry there, Mr. Chairman. The report's very good, and I feel that the recommendations are strong, but I also think that, again, it's gone into politics, and that some of the non-aligned members, or at least one of the non-aligned members, should be considered to sit on this group, and I'd like to see Councillor Morris in that case. It's very easy to not have people put through into that, because sometimes they're rather vocal, but I think people have got a lot to give, and I think they should be a full representation of members of the council, not just a part.
That's a proposal. I'll second it.
There's a proposal. Thank you.
We've got a proposal on the table. And what has just been proposed is an amendment to the names, but not to the substantive little 1 and little 2, just to the name, or little 3 just to the names. So for the time being, I'll move on with the debate with Mrs. Channer.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Just having a bit of technology here, and my report's disappeared off my screen. Just to say, regarding Councillor Swain's point, I actually think the officer who wrote the report has covered that off, because it does state quite clearly there'd be no duplication where there may be other groups, and they would feed in to this body that's being set up, and therefore this body could then be the coordinating role. So I think that covers off Councillor Swain's concerns, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I've got no further speakers at this moment. Tara, have we? Tara?
No, Chairman, that's right. No, that's no further speakers.
Right. So can we agree the 3 recommendations before we move to the motion of names, which there is a motion with 6 names on, which was duly seconded. So can we agree those 1, 2 and 3 members?
Agree.
Right.
Agree.
Now we have a motion. Tara, will you put up the names, if you've got them, the names of the 6 people that are proposed and seconded? Can you do that, Tara? You're mute, I see.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, just give me a second. I'm just bringing it up on the screen.
Okay. And members, this again is a motion with 6 names on it, and if this motion fails, we will then move to an additional motion with Councillor Lagan's proposal.
Chairman, that's as per Councillor Fluker's proposal.
Okay, right, members, this is the motion that we'll be voting on now.
Mr. Chairman,
Tara
it's
will
not
take the
Councillor
roll.
Stant, it's Councillor Stilts.
Yeah, Chairman, that was
Yes,
my...
yes.
Apologies, yeah, that's my mistake.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mrs. Councillor, Mrs. Stilts. That's it.
Yeah, okay. So when Tara puts the question, it's for these 6 names, against or abstain. Tara, please
Chairman,
continue.
can I just check the proposal to include Councillor Morris? Obviously,
No, what I said was that this was the motion on the table. If this fails, we'll then consider Councillor Lagan's proposal.
Okay, Chairman. Right, members, if you can just indicate for, against or abstain, starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger. Sorry, Councillor Miss Beale.
She's gone.
Yeah, Councillor Bell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Sorry?
Councillor Boyce, your vote.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
4, Tara, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Harker.
4.
Councillor Hurd.
Just to confirm, we are voting for these 6 names.
Yes.
Yes. So I cannot support relinquishment of an independent place. So I am for this resolution.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hull?
4.
Councillor Jarvis?
4.
Councillor Keys?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan?
Against, please, Tara.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mays?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Morley?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Morris?
Not politically balanced, so against.
Councillor Nunn?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy?
4.
Councillor Siddle?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens?
Against.
Councillor Stamp?
Against.
Councillor Stilts?
4.
Councillor Swain?
4.
Councillor Mrs Thompson?
4.
And Councillor Chairman, the result of that vote is 18 for, 7 against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
That is therefore carried. We can now move on to agenda item 15. Council Constitution, addition to officer scheme of delegation, pavement licences found on pages 103 to 104. Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. This is fairly straightforward, members, and it comes out of the Business and Planning Act 2020 and the need for us to act swiftly to allow our businesses to trade outside of their premises as a form of mitigation for the implications of the COVID crisis. Chairman, my proposal would be that we agree recommendation 1, and that I think that recommendation 2 isn't quite right, because the actual Business and Planning Act sets a fee of I think a maximum of £100, but I think it's our intention that we're actually saying up to £100 in the report. But I would like some clarity in the recommendation, Chairman, that it should be £50. So we might need to just add a line that the fee for pavement licence applications will be set at £100, but the Malden District Council fee will be £50. I'm sure Mr Holmes will help me out with some wording exactly on that. And Chairman, I would also propose, clearly we've got to act incredibly swiftly over this, but I would propose, Chairman, that a third recommendation is added that says that ward members will be consulted with during the process, Chairman, because I think it's important, because they will have certain information which might not be obviously available to officers when they decide this. So officers will be determining him, but that will be dealt with in consultation with ward members. And I'm sure the ward members in Malden will be, particularly the High Street, will be very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
Agreed.
Mr Holmes?
Agreed.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think the simplest thing is for little 2, the recommendations that the fee for payment licence application be set at. The bill allows us to charge up to 100. It wasn't our intention to go to the maximum, so if we could just change that to £50, that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I've got Councillor Mays wishes to speak, and I think Councillor Swain. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like a bit of clarity, perhaps from Mr. Holmes. The bill actually states that it is a 7-day consultation from the day of the application. Sorry, the day after the application. The report, though, mentions that there is a further 7 days to determine the application. I'm not sure that there is. I think this is really a quick turnaround, and you've got 7 days after the 1 day after you've received the application. Can you just confirm that for me, please?
Yes, I could ask Mr. Lee to come back, because he's actually drafted this. You're right. There are 2 stages. It'd be still incredibly tight, even at 14 days. But Mr. Lee, can you just explain the difference between the 2 periods, please?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Chairman. There is a statutory period, which is the consultation period, and then once again we do have a statutory period in relation to termination. So it's 14 days in totality, but that is obviously different to either or, because obviously for us to be able to make an informed judgment on the determination of any application, we need to have received all the information and to be able to fully assess it and take that into account. I hope that's clarified the matter.
Yeah, that isn't what the bill says. So yeah, okay, I don't know where you've got the statutory allocation for the further 7 days. I'm really concerned that there is a lot of work to do within a 7-day period.
Councillor Swain, or did you want to come back on that, Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to just double refresh myself with the bill right now and just double check that. But that's my understanding is that there's a period, it's 2 periods, but I will get back.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Swain.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to check. This provision applies throughout the district. It is general for the district.
Of course it does.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes. I'll again just check with Mr. Lee. Obviously, we've had a much greater focus around Malden High Street in terms of allowing the trading to there, but I believe it does apply. There are maybe other parts of the district where it will also be suitable to put outside trading. So I believe, yes, we can cover the district.
Yeah, through you, Chairman. Yeah, that is correct. It relates to any business premises within the district. It's not just within a high street or a urban centre. But obviously, the nature of these uses are normally in those locations. But yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. Can I thank the leader for agreeing to involve ward members in this process? As far as Malden High Street is concerned, that was very welcomed by myself and Councillor Mays, and it's a healthy move away from the credence that's been put by an unelected business board in terms of high street issues thus far. So I'm very grateful to him for that. Can I suggest that because speed is of the essence, that the officer leading on this emails the ward members as and when decisions are needed so that we can arrive at a swift conclusion? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. Just the 1 point, because as Mr. Lees has said, most of these sort of locations are in the high streets. I have a safety concern with social distancing, which is 1 point. But the second is, why don't we just waive the fee or charge a nominal sum, because and reinvigorate the high streets and the traders who have suffered tremendously through the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think 50 quid is still too much. Let's support the hell out of these people and let them have it for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to echo Councillor Nunn in thanking the leader for saying that ward members should be involved in decisions. However, having had a great deal of experience on this issue where I lived previously, and with issues we're currently experiencing in Burnham, where people feel they can put chairs and tables out anyway. There are lots and lots of issues involved with this. There's antisocial behaviour, there's obstruction, there's social distancing, and I really would like this. I really think this is important enough to go through licensing. I do realise that might lead to delays. I appreciate that we do need to stimulate business and support business recovery, but there is a potential can of worms involved with this, and I do think we need to think very, very carefully before making any snap decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to emphasise that speed is of the essence here. So if we could shorten it down as much as possible.
You've frozen, I think. Councillor Fleming, are you with us? Tara, have we lost Councillor Fleming?
I'll just check, Chairman. No, she is still showing as being there, Chairman. It may just be a bad connection.
Okay, right. Well, that concludes the speakers on this. Leader, would you like to come back? Sum up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, obviously, we need to move this forward very, very quickly so we can discharge our obligations under the Business and Planning Act 2020. Chairman, I'm glad that my third recommendation has been well received. As far as the comments made by Councillor Bell, obviously she'll be involved with issues in Burnham, so if she's got any specific issues there, she can take them up with officers. I do agree, Chairman, that once we start this process, we'll have a bit more control over what goes on our pavements, because I agree with Councillor Bell. It does seem to be a bit of a free-for-all out there in some places. So, Chairman, I propose that with the additional recommendation, we agree all three. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to agree with this by assent?
Agree.
Go on to agenda item 16, questions to the leader. I have Councillor Swain with a question. I think Councillor Swain, you wanted a question?
Chairman, yes. To the leader. With reference to your response to a member of the public on 2nd of July in relation to the Council's position on Bradwell B, you prefaced your statement on the status of the LDP with the clause, whilst the Council may choose to now advise that it no longer supports the new station, in brackets, by a motion, for example, and so on. I wanted to ask, was this text agreed with Mr. Quelch, who subsequently rejected a motion by me along those very lines?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the motion, my response on the 2nd of July would have been tested legally. It would be remiss of the leader of any council not to do that, because motions are incredibly important to get right, because they often bring forward some very important issues. With regards to any other motion that you may have been brought forward, it is not up to me as the leader of the council to decide whether or not your motion is put to council. It's up to the chairman of the council in consultation with the monitoring officer and others whether or not to accept a motion on terms of legality. But I think I can understand perhaps from what you said very briefly there, but if something's already been answered, then the motion wouldn't come forward. But it's not something I know the detail of, because I'm not aware of your motion. But I mean, clearly, if you're unsure how this sort of works, I'm more than happy to meet with you virtually with the monitoring officer and the chairman, and perhaps we can go through this, because some of the motions you've brought forward have been very important and welcome. So perhaps we can do that. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
I'd like to ask Councillor Fluker, with the mood in the chamber and amongst the community, obviously it's very negative and hostile to Bradwell B. Is it time that we revised our statement of support for Bradwell B? Because how can we trust someone with a nuclear power station when we can't give them Wi-Fi?
Okay, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, look, there is a lot of disquiet about the nuclear power station, or the potential nuclear power station at Bradwell, how it's going to be operated. We've heard a lot about Hawaii. I'm getting emails all the time, particularly on this subject, which are not planning related. But I think I'll use this opportunity, and I'm grateful for it, because it allows me to make answer the question and make a statement to council. I mean, I've drafted a letter to Alok Sharma, who's the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Secretary, regarding the future ownership and shareholding of Bradwell B / CGN, and asking him to explain how they're going to safeguard the operating of this power station should it go ahead in the future. Now, I was writing to him as a member of the council. If members wish me to write on their behalf or of the whole council, if you'd like to email me, then I can add that to it. I can write on behalf of the council rather. With regards to your other question, I mean, that was answered in some depth through, I believe, a question from Judy Lee. To change the LDP would be a long process, would be a very, very long process, and it's up to members if they want to whether it should, whether that's what we want to do. But we will be starting a review of the. We will be starting a review of the LDP shortly, and that will be one of the things that we will start to review straight away. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hurd. Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask a question of the leader, please, on enforcement, planning enforcement. Now, following an informal planning meeting earlier this week, it became apparent to me that this council carries some 500 enforcement cases. In some cases, officers are having a workload of over 200 cases. Now, I don't think that this is sustainable. First of all, is the leader happy with this situation? And if not, what can he do to alleviate it? Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. So I think anybody that knows me, particularly from South East Area Planning Committee, will know that planning enforcement has been on my radar ever since I've been a member of this council, some 9 years. And it's always concerned me the number of cases that's on the enforcement list, how quickly they're dealt with and how quickly they're satisfied. South East Area Planning Committee has held meetings just to consider enforcement issues in that area, and in some cases that's been very, very helpful to the officers. But I agree with you. I'm concerned. I mean, I'm not going to criticise anybody. We know the list has been growing for quite some time, but I think for us to properly understand this, I think it would be very useful, Councillor Hurd, that if you meet me in your capacity as the Chairman of Central Planning, along with the Chairman of the South East Planning and North West Planning, I suggest we meet with Mr. Holmes to review the list with the intention of bringing a report back to council, because I believe it's unsustainable. We need to understand it, and of course, if we do that, it may well be that the local area planning committees might feel as though we need to ask the resources department to see if they could, for example, resource an additional fixed-term contract employee to try and get into this list. I've been trying to do it for years, but we do have to understand as well that over the last 4 or 5 months there has been, the circumstances have been that we can't send the enforcement team out into the community. So, and I think there has been an increase in enforcement cases as well during the COVID crisis. So that's what I'm saying that I'm going to do, and I'll do that as quickly as possible, Councillor Hurd. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question to the leader, please. It's to do with the review of the LDP. There's a couple of points, a couple of questions, please, leader. One, has the LDP ever been reviewed since it was approved by the Secretary of State?
Is your other question connected to the LDP, or?
Yeah, it is, because it's really
okay. I'll answer the first question first, because that's quite straightforward. So with an LDP, there's after our LDP was adopted, legislation changed, or planning law changed, or guidance changed, which said you had to review it every 5 years. So we're fast approaching that. So the answer to the question is we do continuously review it in-house, but we have a statutory obligation to review it, and that will be starting soon, and that will involve members. I don't know any more than that really, but we have a statutory obligation, and that will be starting soon, because we have to satisfy the housing minister that is what we're doing. And
thank you. And just because you've leveraged off that point anyway, the second point is you mentioned earlier that we're going to be undertaking this review shortly. Can we get some dates around these statements? Because we've also mentioned earlier on that it's a long process. How long's a piece of string if we wanted to review it now? So for members to be able to make an informed decision and to make an interpretation about whether
Councillor
we want
Lagan,
to go
a question now, please, not statements.
Well, there's a question in there, Mr. Chairman, as well, isn't
there? There was, but not I prefer no statements.
Chairman,
Qualified question.
Yeah, okay. So, Councillor Lagan, I think I've got your question, and it's always good to have a bit of background and everything else because it gives me a chance to formulate an answer. But this is a pretty straightforward one, really, because my understanding is that, you know, our plan was when our plan was adopted, there'll be a 5-year cycle through to where we start again with the review. Now, I'm quite happy for Mr. Lee to write to you by email to answer the question, but my understanding is we have to do the review at 5 years. That isn't very far away, the first review, and that's when we'll start it. And I'm sure that when we start that process, all members will be involved.
Thank you. I look forward to Mr. Lee.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to be asking a question, but I am now, in light of the leader's response to a previous question, and no disrespect to the leader, what he said, but it does relate to the question posed about from Councillor Hurd regarding enforcement. Does the leader consider, in fact, I know he's agreed to a meeting, but would this not be an item that for the Chairman of Planning Committee's meetings, bearing in mind that body does exist, and with those meetings are noted so everyone can see the outcome of that. And I asked that question. And also, would it through that body be a timely thing to consider actually, bearing in mind the success South East had of holding specific enforcement meetings, I think North West did too, but Central chose to actually do it as part of their planning committee meeting to review that and perhaps have a consistency amongst the 3 committee areas in having meetings to look at enforcement matters as a one-off during the daytime when officers may be more present, although obviously equally with digital now we're all more sort of available.
Yeah, okay, Councillor Channer, you know my feelings about enforcement and everything we've tried to do at South East, and I think we've actually done a pretty good job in some areas. Look, the leader of the opposition, and I shouldn't really go back over previous, you know, he has got a concern, and it's up to me, you know, to say, right, this is what we're going to do. But I agree, you know, the planning committee chairs forum would also be very, very good. So what I'm going to say, Councillor Channer, is I'm going to speak to the Director of Service Delivery after this meeting, and I'll between us we will decide whether or not it goes to the planning committee chairs meeting or we have a separate meeting. But I think the most important thing is that there is a meeting. It's held quickly, and if necessary, we will come back with a report to council on August the 6th. I think it is, because it is starting to get out of control. But I will check the best way to go, Councillor Channer, and we will do this very, very quickly. Thank you.
That concludes questions to the leader. We move on to agenda item 17, business by special circumstances. I have none. We move on to agenda item 18, exclusion of the public and press. And can I have a seconder for the following proposal?
Chairman, could I just make one point on that, please? Chairman?
A point on what?
In relation to the paragraph numbers. For Schedule 12, could paragraph 5 be added as well? That's in relation to legal professional privilege.
Schedule part 1 and 5. Did you say part 1 and 5?
Paragraph 3, which is already down, and paragraph 5, Chairman.
Para 5.
Para 5, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I don't know. Can I have a second for the following motion? That under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, that the public and press be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 and 5 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Act, and that this satisfies the public interest test.
Seconded, Thompson.
Agreed. Okay, Tara, can we confirm that the public stream is off?
Yes, Chairman, just